We're going to be reading chapter 17 now of Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Adventures. This is the caption on the top. It's awful long. It says, "In which you read, dear friends, something about a live alarm clock and a pseudopsy bather and rubber. Our first breakfast in the city of silver, a new way to catch fish without hurting their feelings, how the streets and houses were numbered, and where the signboards were, a very original library in which books never get dog-eared, how Velvet Souls enjoyed her favorite poets. I am presented to the learned Barrel Brow, who proceeds to give me his views of the upper world. They entertain me amazingly and may interest you. I can't tell you, dear friends, exactly how long Bulger and I slept, but I must have been a good while, for when I was awakened I felt thoroughly refreshed. I say awakened, for I was awakened by a gentle tapping on the back of my hand, 6 taps. At first I thought I was dreaming, but upon rubbing my eyes I saw standing by the side of my bed one of the pseudopsies, who, feeling me stir, took up his tablet and wrote as follows: "My name is Tappard. I am a clock. There is a score of us. We keep the time for our people by counting the swing of the pendulum in the time house. It swings about as fast as we breathe. There are 100 breaths to a minute and 100 minutes to an hour. Our day is divided into 6 hours work time and 6 hours sleep time. It is now the rising hour. If thou wilt be pleased to rise, one of our people from the health house will rub all the tired out of thy limbs." I touched Tappard's heart to thank him and made haste to scramble out of bed. Now for the first time I looked about the silver chamber in which I had slept. On silver shelves lay silver combs and silver shears and silver knives, and on a silver stand stood a silver oar within a silver basin, and on silver pegs hung silken towels, while spread upon the silver floor lay soft silken rugs. And above and around the ceiling and the walls, the tongues of flame were 1,000 times repeated in the panels of the burnished silver. I had made a trial of all sorts of oriental rubber and bath attendants in my day, but the silent little pseudopsy, who laved and rubbed and tapped and stroked me, exceeded them all in dexterity, added to which was a new charm, for I was not obliged to listen to long and senseless tales of adventure and intrigue, but was left quite alone to my own thoughts. Bulger was also treated to a sponging and rubbing, a luxury he had not enjoyed since we left Castle Trump. My toilet was no sooner completed than Long Thumbs made his appearance to inquire after my health, and to superintend the serving of my breakfast, which consisted of a piece of most delicate boiled fish, flanked with oysters of delicious flavor, and trimmed with slices of those monstrous mushrooms which I had eaten among the Minkamonkeys, the whole served in a beautiful silver dish on a silver tray with silver eating utensils. Remembering the strange way in which the fish were caught and killed in the land of Minkamonkeys, I was curious to know how the pseudopsies managed it, for I knew enough of them to know that the sensation of anything struggling for its life in their hands would suffice to throw them into fits of great suffering, to fill their gentle hearts with nameless terror. At the end of one of the many corridors leading out of our city, explained Long Thumbs, there's a rocky chamber which was called by our ancestors Up Hoshlock, or the Death Hole, because any being which breathes its air for a few moments is sure to die. So they closed it up forever, leaving only a small pipe projecting through the door. But strange to say, those who breathe this air suffer no pain whatever, but presently drop off into a pleasant dream, and unless they be rescued, would, of course, never wake again. Now, as our laws forbid us to cause any pain to the most insignificant creature, it occurred to our ancestors that by means of a long pipe they could turn this poisoned air into the river whenever they wanted a supply of fish for food. This they did, and strange to say, the moment the fish felt the gas bubbling into the river, they at once swam up to the mouth of the pipe and struggled with each other for a chance to catch the deadly bubbles as they left its mouth. So pleasant a sensation do they cause as they gradually plunge, the creature breathing them into his last sleep. And in this way it is we are enabled to feed upon the fish in our river without breaking the law of the land. I began to understand that I had fallen in with a very original and interesting folk, but Bulger was not altogether pleased with them for several reasons, as I soon observed. In the first place, he couldn't accustom himself to the cold and glassy look in their eyes, and in the next he was a bit jealous of their wonderfully keen scent, a sense which with them was so strong that they invariably gave signs of being conscious of Bulger's approach even before I could see him, and always turned their faces in the direction in which he was coming. You will remember, dear friends, that I mentioned the fact that the former folk went barefoot, and that their feet as well as their hands seemed altogether too large for their bodies. And I wish to add that while Bulger and I were being led through the long corridors and the winding passages on our way into the city of silver, the three Pseudopsies frequently half halted and seemed to be feeling on the floor for something with the balls of their feet. I thought no more about it until Bulger and I started out for our first stroll through the wonderful town, when, to my great delight, I made the discovery that the numbers of the houses, the names of the occupants, the names of the streets, as well as the signboards, so to speak, and all the guideposts were in slightly raised letters on the floors, and hang on, I'm going to turn the channel, the page. It says Beryl Brow engaged in reading 4 books at once. I think these are the blind people. Okay, let's get to the next page. Pavements, and then the truth dawned upon me that the Long Thumbs and his companions were simply halting now and then to read the names of the streets with the balls of their feet in order to know if they were taking the right road. More than this, dear friends, the first time Bulger and I passed through one of the open squares of the city silver, you may imagine my satisfaction upon the discovery that the silver pavements were literally covered with the writings of the Pseudopsy authors in raised characters. Now, in Dom Thumb's wonderful book, he had, in his masterly manner, given me the key to the language of the former folk, so that with very slight effort I was able to make the additional discovery that some of the trees were given up to the writers of history, and some of the stories, while others were filled with the learned works of philosophers, and others still contained many thousands of lines from the best poets which the nation had produced. And I had very little difficulty in discovering which were the favorite poems of the Pseudopsies, For as you may readily suppose, these were polished like a silver mirror by the shuffling of the many thankful feet over the sweet and soulful lines. I noticed that the writings of the philosophers, in this and in my own world, found few readers, for the raised letters were, in many cases, tarnished and black from lack of souls trampling over them in sheer search of wisdom. Somewhat later, when I had become acquainted with Velvet Souls, the daughter of Long Thumbs, a gracious little being as full of inward light as she was blind to the outer world, and she invited me to come for a read. I had a hard task of it in persuading her that I could not remove what she called my ridiculous foot boxes, and join her in enjoying some of her favorite poems. It was to me a delicious pastime to accompany this happy little maiden when she went for a read, to walk beside her and watch every varying expression of her beautiful face as the soles of her tiny feet pressed the words of love and hope and joy, and her heart expanded, and she clasped her hands in attitudes of blissful enjoyment, seemingly just as deep and fervent as if the blessed sunlight rested on her brow, and her eyes were drinking in the glory of the summer sunset. O dwellers in the upper world, with the light streaming into the windows of your soul, with your ears open to the music of the pipes and flute and violin, and to the sweeter music of the voice of love, how much more have ye than she? And yet how rarely are ye as happy, how rarely do ye know that sweet contentment, which as in this case came from within? Go to the ant, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provided her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. In a short time the former folks seemed to become quite accustomed to having Bulger and me among them, as they apparently touched hands with me in quite as friendly a fashion as if I had been one of them. One day Long Thumbs conducted me to the house of the most age-learned Pseudopsis, Barrel Brow by name. He received me very cordially, although I interrupted him at his studies, for as I entered his apartment, he was in the act of reading 4 different books at the same time. 2 were lying on the floor, and he was perusing their raised characters with the soles of his feet, and 2 others were set up in a frame in front of him, and he was deciphering them with the tips of his fingers. But when informed who I was, he stopped work at once, and taking up his tablet, asked me a number of questions concerning the upper world, of which he had, however, no very exalted opinion. You people, he said, if I understand correctly, the ancient writings of those of our nation who still preserved certain traditions of the upper world are endowed with several senses, which are utterly lacking in us. I am happy to say, for if I understand correctly, ye have in the first place a sense which ye call hearing, a most troublesome sense, for by means of it ye are being constantly disturbed and annoyed by vibrations of the air coming from afar. Now, they can be of no possible good to you. You might as well have a sense that would inform you what was going on in the moon. Therefore, my conclusion is that the sense of hearing only serves to distract and weaken the brain. Another sense that ye are possessed of, continued Barrel Brow, ye call the sense of sight, a power even more useless and distracting than hearing, for the reason that it enables you to know things which it is utterly bootless to know, such as what your next-door neighbor may be doing, how the mountains are acting on the other side of your rivers, how your sky, as ye call it, might feel if you could touch it with your fingers, which you can't do. However, how soon rain will fall, which is a useless piece of knowledge if ye have roofs to cover you. I suppose ye have, But the most ridiculous use which ye make of the sense of sight is to manufacture of what ye call pictures, by means of which ye seem to take the greatest pleasure in deceiving this very sense of which ye are so proud, very proud. If I understand correctly, these pictures, if felt of, are quite as smooth as that panel there, but so cunningly do ye draw the lines and lay in the colors, whatever they may be, that ye really succeed in deceiving yourselves and stand for hours in front of one of these bits of trickery, when ye might, if ye choose, feast your eyes, as ye call it, on the very thing which the trickster has imitated. Now, as life is much shorter in the upper world than in ours, it seems very strange to me that ye should wish to waste it in this foolish manner. Then there is another thing, little Baron, continued Learned Brow, which I wish to mention. It is this: the people of the upper world pride themselves very much upon what they term the power of speech, which, if I may understand correctly, is a faculty they have of expressing their thoughts to each other by violently expelling the air from their lungs, and that this air rushing into the ventilators of the brain, which he calls ears, produces a sensation of sound, as ye term it, and in this way one of thy people standing at one end of the town might make his wishes known to another standing at the other end. Now, thou wilt pardon my thinking so, little Baron, but this seems to me to be not a whit above the brute creature, which, opening its vast jaws, thus sets the air in motion, in calling its young or breathing defiance at an enemy. And if I understand correctly, little Baron, so proud are thy people of this power of speech, that they insist upon making use of it at all times, and upon all occasions, and is strange to say, these talkers can always find plenty of people to open their ears to these vibrations of the air, although the effect is so wearying to the brain that in the end they invariably fall asleep. But if I understand correctly, the women are even fonder of displaying their skill in thus puffing out the air from their lungs than the men are, but that, not satisfied with the superior power of puffing out the words, they actually have recourse to a potent herb which they steep in boiling water and drink as hot as possible, on account of its effect of loosening the tongue and allowing the talker to do more puffing than she could otherwise. But all of this, little Baron, excuse me, continued the learned Barrowbrow, might be overlooked and regarded in the light of mere amusement, were it not for the fact, if I understand correctly, that brain ventilators being of different sizes in different persons, the consequence is that these puffs of air, which ye use to make known your thoughts to each other, produce different effects upon different persons, and the result is that the people of the upper world spend half their time repeating the puffs which they already sent out, and that even then thou canst really find two people who will agree exactly as to the number, kind, strength, and meaning of the puffs blown into each other's brain ventilators, and that therefore has it become necessary to provide what ye call judges to settle these disputes, which often last lifetimes, the two parties spending their entire fortunes hiring witnesses to come before these judges and imitate the sound which the air made when it was set in motion years ago by the angry puffs of the two parties. I sincerely trust, little Baron, wrote Learned Barrowbrow on his tablet of silver, that when thou returnest to thy people thou wilt make known to them what I have written for thee today, for it is never too late to correct a fault, and the longer that fault has lasted, the greater the credit for correcting it. I promised the learned Pseudopsy to do as he requested, And then we touched each other on the back of the head, which is the way they say goodbye in the land of the former folk, and touch on the forehead meaning, how do you do? Well, until next time, thank you for listening. I shall come back again and finish with chapter 18 next time. Take care, bye.